All right. The defense, you're now up. Please let me know who will be presenting first. I will put them full screen. If there are documents that need to be displayed, if you need assistance with that, please let us know. Who is up first for the defense?
That is, I believe, Tom, or if Tom.
Tom. Is it Tom or Dave? Mr. Korn?
Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted, Mr. Korn.
I thought it was Gordo.
All right.
Are you ready, Gordo, or do you want me to do it?
No, I'll go first.
Well, I would like to go first, actually.
And please be aware, there are 4 of you. Be aware that the maximum time we're trying to stick to is 40 minutes. My preference is shorter, more powerful arguments. If you're not speaking, perhaps keep yourself muted and just keep that clock in your head. Mr. Willie for the defense, spelled with an S. You're up first. I'll put you full screen here to begin your presentation.
Thank you for your time. Our argument in total is that there is no fraud. That Disney had intended the original cast to be supporting characters, and that also they've had that. So I like to exhibit Defense Exhibit A, which Alan has as an article from the Hollywood Reporter. They were talking about when the original writer, before J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan, took over the script, that early drafts had the original characters meant to be supporting characters. One of the reason why the friction between the original writer and J.J. and Kasdan was because they wanted to increase the original characters more. However, they decided to go, as you can see in the final product, they decided to keep them as supporting characters. We'd also like to present as Exhibit B the links to the trailer and the teaser trailer for the original Star Wars movie, where, especially in the theatrical trailer, they had included shots of the original 3, Han, Luke, and Leia, but they never included any shots of them together. That shows that they were in the film, that they were promised to be in the film, but they weren't. But Disney never made any promises to have them together in a scene.
Okay.
Now, going about the reason of why they were necessary to be supporting characters, I would like to enter in Exhibit E and Exhibit G to show with timestamps of how Han and Luke in particular fit in story-wise as mentor characters to tie in with Kylo Ren's story arc, and why their sacrifices as characters were relevant, since they were supporting mentor characters. If we're reading the critics court charge, the charge is that they represented their plans of the Star. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. So, our argument is that my argument is that there is no misrepresentation to the audience that their beloved characters Han, Luke, and Leia were going to be in the movie, but not necessarily together. We also show with the documents they're presented with the timestamps that they, as mentor characters, help tie in and reinforce Kylo Ren's story arc which is in an early draft, which in the early draft of the charges, which was one of the charges, was the fact that they were killed off unceremoniously. With in regards to Princess Leia, why we didn't include the Rise of Skywalker, unfortunately, because of the passing of Carrie Fisher, there was not much they can do with the Princess Leia character, since if they were going to have her story end in The Last Jedi, that it would be they would have to overhaul parts of the story, which would lead to which would inflate the cost, which would inflate the budget, which any responsible filmmaker has to keep the budget in mind. And that's my case.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Willie. Who would like to go next? Mr. Korn.
Yes.
Mr. Korn, I'll put you full screen. You have the floor, sir.
All right. I would also like to reaffirm Willie's case that there was no fraud according to the charges in this case here, where they were misrepresenting that the cast was not going to be in the films. They are in the films. There's mention somehow in the charges that they were supposed to be together, but there's no mention by Lucasfilm or their advertising that they were going to appear together, or were they going to be part of the main story at all. Because if we're going to do a continuing saga, like the prequel showed, that there were different characters. There was a thread of like Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan, but there's a continuing thread, and that each thread of the story leapfrogs characters to the next chapter. And that's exactly what the prequels or the sequels have done. Is just leapfrog with the original characters, Han, Luke, and Leia, and C-3PO and R2, and springboard the next characters to continue the saga. And also, my base argument is also financial drive, because fans have been criticizing the films, but yet we've been going to the movies and filling the theater seats, and they've been raking in billions of dollars each film. So for Disney point of view, it's not really broken, because there's nothing to fix for them if it makes money. And that's my base argument. And then I hand over to
Mr. Dave?
I would like to continue this idea that Disney did not commit fraud when it was making the Force Awakens, etc. If we look at the total storyline of Star Wars as begun by George Lucas, you will have episode 1 telling a generational story. It goes from the story with Luke, Han, and Leia. It goes back to Anakin as a child. This means that baked into George's potential vision for 7, 8, and 9, that those were going to be the next generation in the story. Yes, you would have holdovers, and those holdovers would play minor roles, as was shown. But I want to address something that Your Honor has addressed in the past, and that is the death of Han Solo specifically, because that has been characterized as one of the worst cinematic deaths in cinema history, and I have to disagree. If we look at episode 1, we have the death of a mentor figure, of a father figure in the person of Qui-Gon Jinn. In episode 4, the beginning of the next generational story, we have the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Obi-Wan Kenobi was a major player, a central character in the first trilogy. So you have to have, if you're going to keep the same story beats, the same elements that George used in the original Star Wars. He says he used Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces as his blueprint. And in that blueprint is the mentor character who often disappears or dies. And we have this pattern, and it necessarily repeats itself. And so you have to have one of your characters from 4, 5, and 6 be that father figure that dies. And if you're going to continue that, Obi-Wan died by a lightsaber. Qui-Gon Jinn died by a lightsaber. Therefore, in Episode 7, the one character that you have that can play that father figure and die is Han Solo. You can't have Leia because Leia is not a father figure. You can't have Luke because Luke represents the hope of a renewal or a transformation of the Jedi Order. The one character that you have that can play that role and step into that role, and is a role that Harrison Ford himself wanted to do for decades, that's Han Solo, and he died by being killed with a lightsaber. So the makers of Episode 7 honored George's vision and repeated that particular story beat with the new series. And so therefore, to call that fraudulent, to call that the worst death in cinema history is not true, not fair, and certainly not something that the prosecution can point to as saying fraudulent. That's what I would like to make as a case in the defense of Disney. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Dave. Mr. Gordo, or excuse me, Dr. Gordo, you're up next. You have the floor, sir.
Oh, well, I apologize, Justice Gore. I'm not sure what happened. A little technical problem. Unfortunately, I heard none of what was just said, but the defense team has prepared, so I have a good idea of what they said. Rather than unnecessarily repeat anything, I'm prepared to go straight to the conversation, the cross-examination.
Go right ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Ng, if it will please the court, could you please read count 1 of the indictment?
Sure. Let me pull it up here. If, actually, I think, here we go. Count 1, the film threat jury in the name and on behalf of the citizens of the fandom of the Star Wars, charges and accuses Lucasfilm Disney with offense of fraudulent misrepresentation. On or about the 30th day of October 2012, Lucasfilm Disney did unethically and fraudulently misrepresent their plans for Star Wars franchise as a whole. Lucasfilm Disney also knowingly set expectations that the original trilogy cast, defined as Han, Luke, and Leia, would reunite in The Force Awakens. The failure to reunite the legacy characters during the events in the Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy and the disrespectful demise of original trilogy cast showed blatant disregard and disrespect for the Star Wars franchise and the fandom.
Could you please define fraudulent for me, please?
Fraudulent would be not being a true lawyer, but it would be to represent something, but maliciously represent something else. Or to maliciously do something else.
Okay, maliciously do something else. And the charge also includes the term unethical. Could you please give me a brief definition for unethical?
Knowingly not do what is right.
Knowingly. Okay. So I listened to, obviously, excellent presentation. You talked about implications and some, you gave your take of the situation, but I'm having trouble explicitly linking to what you presented to the court to the definitions you just provided. So could you briefly re-walk me through the connection between fraudulent misrepresentation and Disney Star Wars?
Yes. Well, I believe Anna had brought up first that there was an expectation among fans that Disney would continue on the that Disney would continue the legacy that George Lucas had established. That is what we, as the money-paying fans of the franchise, were expecting. Then in the announcements leading up to it, the announcement of the acquisition of Disney, the announcements of the first movie, the photo as seen in the the script read of The Force Awakens, we were led to believe that the legacy characters would return, and in a much more significant way than had actually happened. And I would point specifically to the fact that Luke Skywalker does not show up until the very end of the movie.
Okay, expectingly.
There were laid out expectations, not explicitly stated, but fans were led to believe that this would happen. Such as if you buy a car, you were led to believe that it would actually work.
Okay, actually work. So it sounds like you're saying that the fans went to the theater, they saw this content, and were disappointed. Is that a fair enough assumption?
Objection leading.
Yes, I cannot speak to the fandom in general.
Okay, I can rephrase.
Well, I objected, which means you don't have to answer until the judge makes a decision on it. He's leading.
Sustained.
So expectantly. So Disney expectantly put this message across to the fans that these things were going to be happen, and fans went to the theater. What they expected did not happen, and therefore that's fraud?
Objection, hearsay. You don't have to make me full screen every time.
If I may jump in, Your Honor, it's not just a fan was disappointed by the quality of the film. That happens all the time. That is unavoidable and certainly not subject to litigation. But the fact that they were presented with evidence that such and such would happen in the film as far as actors appearing and then not being present in the film itself, that's a significant difference.
Mm-hmm. Now, and I hear what you're saying about the car analogy. If I went test drove a car.
Let me just Star Wars Celebration 2015. The big announcement was made. Carrie Fisher was there on stage with Mark Hamill on stage, and if not for a plane accident, Harrison Ford would have been there. And so the idea there that having the three of them, expecting the three of them to be together, which was planned and scheduled, we were expecting also that in the film as well.
And also the term Han, Luke, and Leia is part of the pop culture lexicon. There's a reason why we hear those names, string them together in that fashion. It is a significant part of the legacy that was not honored in those films.
Always. In our own preparation, we referred to them as the big three. I heard some great stories here today, great history lessons. I'm a history teacher myself, really enjoyed it. I'm just having I'm a little confused that when did Disney Star Wars explicitly state that the big three would be in this movie and all in the same scene together? Did that ever happen?
Can I just say, Dr. Gordo, that now it sounds like we've moved to open debate. Now that you've engaged with the prosecution, if you'd like to wrap up your comments for in terms of the charges, we can move to open debate, and it can be less formal than we're doing right now. Everyone can talk amongst each other, but what I'd like to see you do is kind of wrap up your argument without engaging necessarily the defense. You'll have an opportunity to do that once we move to open debate. And thank you again for your for taking this so seriously. You please continue.
I'm sorry, Justice. I missed. I was a little out of the loop there for a moment. I thought we were in open debate. So
okay.
I'm ready to proceed. Debate.
Okay. Well, then let's actually formally move to the open debate format.
Can I just say before we do that? So sorry to interrupt. We still haven't heard Gordo's point, and I would like to know his point and where he stands on everything before we enter a debate. He has the advantage of hearing where everyone else stands, so I would like to hear where he stands.
Dr. Gordo, if you would complete your statement. Obviously, you were leading to a point. If you could get to that, and then it's open debate, a free for all. so to speak, with limits, of course. Dr. Gordo, you have the floor.
Quickly as possible. I'm looking at this charge, and I am struggling to find when and where Disney Star Wars made explicit statements that were not followed up with and therefore meet the criteria for fraud. It seems to me, Your Honor, that the fans were simply disappointed. And that disappointment, that means something. That's real. That's important. But just because you're disappointed doesn't mean someone committed fraud. Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Korn, if you would like to take the opportunity to make another statement or wrap up briefly, I could hear you, actually. You weren't on your best mic, but go ahead if you'd like to say something.
I think I'm on my best mic now.
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Anything you'd like to say?
I just would like to reaffirm and add a little bit more to that. I did not see any actual fraud from Lucasfilm or Disney presenting 7, 8, and 9 specifically, or just 7. They did say, we have a picture of the original. You have Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill in this big living room setting on a couch sitting together. They are in the movie. But there's nowhere in any of the advertising that they are going to be even together in one scene together, because this is a continuing extension of the Star Wars saga, and the saga has to leapfrog and make a new chapter in the story, and you leapfrog by letting the old characters push the new characters forward, which is what I believe has happened. Plus, I believe that the fans have been disappointed, and rightly so, I would agree, but we should also show our disappointment at the box office, and we haven't done that. We've given the Disney and Lucasfilm no incentive to change anything because we keep filling the theaters over and over again, and they keep breaking in the money. So in they're bottom line people, and they see profit, they don't need to fix anything. And that is my summation.